The rise of anti-Semitism and global protests against Israel because of the bombardment of Gaza have shaken Jews around the world. The level of deep-seated hatred based on religion has been both shocking and terrifying for many. Here to discuss a situation that feels like it's spiraling out of control are Mary Eberstadt, Senior Research Fellow at the Faith and Reason Institute, and Father Benedict Kiely, founder of Nazarene.org, which advocates for persecuted Christians around the world, with a particular focus on the Middle East. Welcome both of you to this discussion. Father Benedict, this week, both Hamas and Hezbollah extremists said that they will not back down and are threatening continued violence against Israel. Let's listen to a Hamas senior leader speaking on Lebanese television.
We must teach Israel a lesson, and we will do this again and again. The Al-Aqsa flood is just the first time, and there will be a second, a third, a fourth, because we have the determination, the resolve, and the capabilities to fight. Will we have to pay a price? Yes, and we are ready to pay it. We are called a nation of martyrs, and we are proud to sacrifice martyrs.
Many of Israel's friends and enemies are calling for a humanitarian pause or ceasefire to address the situation in Gaza. But is that enough in the face of this Hamas call for more attacks?
No, quite simply, Montse, and thank you for having me. We're dealing with, we use the term existential crisis quite often, but this truly is an existential crisis for the state of Israel. Hamas is committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. That sounds rather simple on paper. That means the destruction of the Jewish people who live in Israel. They will do to every Jew in Israel what they did to the 1,000 plus 1,400 people that they murdered just a few weeks ago, babies, women, children. It's a terrible thing that innocent people have to suffer, but Israel is fighting for its very existence against an evil, and I use that word quite deliberately, an evil foe, who will also, by the way, for our audience, once they destroy the Jews, will turn on the Christians. When the old saying is, when the Saturday people are dealt with, the Sunday people will be dealt with. That's us. So this is an existential fight for the state of Israel and for the people of Israel.
Well, things don't seem to be getting any better. Mary, we are seeing frightening scenes of anti-Semitism, not just in the Middle East, but around the world. From last weekend, this video from an airport in western Russia, just north of Iran. Hundreds of rioters stormed into the airport and then onto the tarmac, following the arrival of an international flight from Tel Aviv. Reports indicate that they were chanting anti-Semitic slogans and trying to hunt down Jewish passengers. This is an area of Russia that is predominantly Muslim. The Jewish passengers had to shelter in an airport lounge before they were able to leave safely, and several protesters were arrested. Now, how should we, as Christians, as Catholics, be thinking about these acts of hatred?
Well, we need to understand first, Montse, that there must be no moral equivalence here, any more than there was in World War II about what the Nazis did. Someone said of World War II, the Nazis ripped the lid off hell. That is what Hamas has done. It has ripped the lid off hell, and with it has come an outpouring of public anti-Semitism, the likes of which we have not seen since the 1940s, and we're seeing them in the United States as well. We have to be very clear about this. What happened on October 7th wasn't just some conflict between, on the one hand this, on the other hand that. Families, babies were murdered in their sleep. This was not a kind of killing that fell from the sky. These murders were committed often inches away from the victims. And there was a revelry in the blood and the gore that I think has shocked the entire civilized world. That's what we're looking at when we look at things like the footage you just showed.
It's shocking. Father Benedict, the U.S. and our allies are worried this conflict will grow into what could become a worldwide conflagration. What should inform the Catholic view about this region of the world, the Holy Land, the Middle East?
Well, we believe that much of the Middle East is holy. We think specifically of Israel when we talk of the Holy Land. But if you think, for example, Syria and Lebanon, These places are places where the Lord himself walked. Egypt, of course, he went as a baby when Joseph and Mary had to flee persecution. So much of the Middle East is holy. It's a place where the Lord walked and his disciples spread the gospel. So it's very important to us as Catholics. We need to have an interest, not just in this current conflict, but also, as we know, in terms of the persecution of our Christian brethren who've been there from the beginning. So we can't avoid it. I would encourage people, and it's not a weak statement, I'd encourage people to pray. We've been called by the Holy Father and various others to pray. This should be serious and urgent prayer. God answers prayer, and it's not a last resort, it's a first resort. So I'd encourage every Catholic to be praying every day for peace.
Absolutely. Well, Mary, the protests around the globe have sparked controversy, representing more than the plight of Palestinians, however, but also involving abortion and LGBTQ activists. What do you think is the root cause of this intersectionality between the two plights?
Well, Montse, I think the root cause is repaganization. As organized Christianity declines in important parts of the West, we are seeing a return to pagan mores. That is the only thing that unites these otherwise disparate groups that would otherwise be at each other's throats. They have no code of ethics, unlike Christianity, which, although its record in World War II and the Holocaust was mixed, it was never the case that Christianity taught the kind of revelry in bloodshed or taught that it was good to kill the Jews. So with the receding of belief in Scripture, we are seeing what happens without it. What happens without it is that people who believe in nothing at all except for the rule of the stronger are surging, again, not only in places where we might expect it, but on American campuses. This is a civilizational step back.
A huge step back. And Father Benedict, then, do these values that Mary just discussed affect the people in the Middle East on the ground in the same way? With our Western eyes, are we actually understanding what the situation really is there and what's actually happening?
Well, Montse, we see over the years what's happened to Christians as well, not just Jews now, but to Christians in the Middle East. And many of them, I have to say, have felt that the West has forgotten them. I've heard this a number of times in Iraq and in Syria from our brethren, that they felt that we hear nice things once in a while, but the West has forgotten them. And I think that's unfortunately true, that we tend to think it's such an awful crisis, there's nothing we can do about it, it's been 2,000 years. But there's a great deal we can do, and I think our Jewish brethren are appreciating very much at the moment the good Christians, like we were all together in Steubenville, Ohio, just a week ago, releasing this statement on Catholics against anti-Semitism. I think our Jewish brethren are very grateful to us, and we should rightly do it, but they're very grateful that we're showing support, and this is part, again, of the Church's mission to be standing with those who are suffering for their religion, suffering for their nationality.
And the casualties there on both sides that are significant. Well, Mary, the relationship between Catholic Christians and Jews is often cited as the reason we show such support for the Jewish community. Can you explain it plainly for us?
Christianity would not exist without Judaism. That's point one. Point two, again, during the Holocaust and in other moments of history, some Christians disgraced themselves with their behavior toward the Jewish people. Some Christians were outstanding counterexamples. If you go to Yad Vashem in Israel, the Holocaust Memorial Museum, you will see over 27,000 people honored for having saved Jewish people in World War II, and most of those people were Christian. So that is the example we should look for, Montse. What we are hoping for, those of us who were at the conference in Steubenville last week, is to forge an alliance between Catholics and Jews, the likes of which has not existed before, so that we follow the catechism that tells us we can go to hell if we hate our neighbor, so that we embrace our Jewish friends and even those Jews we don't know and stand in solidarity, especially at this critical moment.
And Mary, really quick, just because we're running out of time, for those who are worried about the casualties in Gaza and worried about the plight of the Palestinians, what can you tell them about how we should be praying for them?
We should pray for the victims of Hamas's violence wherever they may be, and the people suffering now in Gaza are victims of Hamas. Hamas started this, Father Ben said, existential conflict. I see it as a civilizational conflict. And there's no question about who is in the right here.
Well, I'm grateful for that, and we're grateful for both of you who are watching this continuing crisis. Thank you both.
Thank you, Montse.
Thank you, Montse.